There's a debate in this country over the national anthem. Football season is over, but for a while there, the Star-Spangled Banner dominated our political discourse. As the rocket's red glare and our nation either kneeled in protest or stood in reverence, one thing became clear: the connection our country has with the song. But what if, instead of not sitting or standing, you weren't allowed to sing the song at all? And what if it didn't stop at the Star-Spangled Banner? But what if every song you sang, every book you read, every movie you watched, and every story you were told about America, we're told it didn't exist? Well, in 1941, at the height of World War II, this exact thing happened to Estonia. For over 50 years, this small Baltic state, 1/3 the size of Washington, and with only 1 million people, had 25% of its population massacred by the occupying Soviet Union army. At the same time, they endured a cultural genocide that banned, destroyed, and replaced every semblance of Estonian art or tradition. But what through is now known as the Singing Revolution, the people of Estonia showed creative defiance, fearlessness, and taught us how remembrance of a common song and history can be a powerful catalyst for unity. Now, some of you may never have heard of Estonia. I certainly hadn't. It wasn't until I had an Italian teacher who was based out of Tallinn, Estonia's capital, that it even came on my radar. Shocked, she said, that I'd never heard of it. She told me how it had a booming technology sector, the origin of Skype, and how it was the fastest growing GDP out of any state in the EU. This, of course, sparked my interest, and only then did I learn the remarkable odds this country had overcome, and how through the stunning courage of its people did it avoid complete extinction. Now, Estonia was first occupied by the Nazis during World War II, and then after the war by Soviet Russia. In an attempt to colonize a once autonomous country, the Soviets banned all Estonian history, literature, and national songs, and replaced it with their own. They even replaced the official language from Estonian to Russian. They became strangers in their own country, and 3,000 years of tradition and history were destroyed right before their eyes. Their leaders felt helpless, and as their army was non-existent. But the citizens had other plans. See, according to the World Music Library, Estonia has one of the world's largest repertoires of folk songs and a rich tradition of choral singing. And through what can only be described as creative defiance, they chose to use music as their weapon. Now, every year they had a music festival. This music festival was called Laputa. The occupying Soviets allowed it to continue, but only if they sang prescribed songs, praising the state and praising communists. It wasn't until 1988 that an artist named Oliver entered in a traditional Estonian folk song, "Land of My Fathers, Land That I Love." The artist was immediately thrown out, and the entire concert was put on hold. Yet the word spread, and 1 year later, at the same concert, 300,000 Estonians, 1/3 of the country, showed up. And in the middle of the assigned communist songs, they began to sing their own traditional Estonian folk songs. This act of fearless defiance through song continued, when later that year, the Soviet Union sent an entire battalion to crush any support for a potential uprising. But instead of submitting to a government that had just stripped them of everything that was once theirs, they again took fearlessly to the streets. In 1989, 700,000 Estonians joined 500,000 Latvians and 1 million Lithuanians in linking hands, which ran the length of all three countries. This was known as the Baltic Chain. Now, to be clear, this wasn't some kumbaya Cindy Lou Who singing Dowry Dory around the Christmas tree. This was men, women, children, grandparents, entire families singing Mu Asama Ume Arm while staring to the barrels of tanks and Russian soldiers. Russian soldiers whose shoes were still charred from torching the towns and traditions, still muddied from stomping the neighbors into serfdom, and still bloodied for murdering 250,000 Estonians during their occupation. Add on the anxiety of the Soviet domestic politics at the height of the Cold War, there was no way the commanders were going to let a small country with no army embarrass them on the world stage. The Estonian people knew this. but it didn't stop them. Hundreds of thousands of people continued to fill the streets with their songs in defense of their community, culture, and independence. They transcended personal grievances and united around a desire to be one people with songs, flags, and languages, all their own. And on a warm August day in 1991, they dusted off and flew the flag that they'd been forced to bury, officially declared their independence, and dared the Russians to come get them. They never came. After 50 years of murders, occupation, and cultural genocide, Estonia had finally gained their independence without firing a single shot. Now I bet if you ask the Russians about the singing revolution, they'd probably tell you their singing was so bad that we couldn't take it anymore. But we know it wasn't about the songs, but the unifying spirit that those songs represented. Because intertwined in those songs were harmonies that created harmony, and melodies that stirred up memories of a life they'd been forced to forget, but a life that none of them ever could. I think Estonians would ask, what have you been forced to forget? And how has erasing your past been used to divide you? Estonia would say, reflect on those shared stories and those shared experiences, and in a call for unity, use those shared songs. Use them to unite around a better future, one where we're all accepted, one where we're all loved, and one where we can all call our home. So the next time you're watching the Seahawks game, and the flag is wavering, and the sputtering wind and the Star-Spangled Banner is playing, and people are either standing or kneeling, Estonia would say, cherish that moment. Because that song, that flag, and your freedom could be taken away right before your eyes. The question is, what would you do to get back?